Deion Sanders brought in another top transfer portal class, but does that mean that some of the fan favorites aren't going to be starting in 2024?
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Borba. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. We're also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure to tune in, like, subscribe, follow, and all that jazz. I appreciate you guys for making me your first listen of the day. We're talking about starting spots getting snatched, and it's not because these guys aren't good. It's just because Coach Prime does what he does best, which is acquire talent. And I would say this year's portal class, although it ranks number 5 compared to last year's number 1, is worlds better. Last year's number 1 class was more of a quantity over quality class. Now, don't get me wrong. There was guys like Travis Hunter, Shador, Shiloh, whoever else, Jimmy Horn Jr., Xavier Weaver, who were all really good players. But this year, I look at this portal class, and it would shock me if majority of these guys aren't at least starters or key contributors for the Buffs in 2024. So with that being said, there are 3 positions that really stand out as positions that we may see a different starter because of the transfers they brought in. So we'll start off on offense at one where it probably makes the most sense to you guys, and you're probably gonna be like, okay, that makes sense. We're going running back. Obviously, Dylan Edwards was kind of the de facto starter this past season. They kind of rotated between him, Anthony Hankerson, Steven Wilkerson was also in there. But Dylan Edwards was the most productive back. I believe he had the most carries on the team last season. He was a speedy freshman that flipped from Notre Dame. He was very, very effective for Colorado, especially in their first game against TCU. And then I think as the season went on, we kind of saw how poorly this run offense or this rush offense was. He was second on the team in carries behind Hankerson, who had 78. He had 76. So obviously Hankerson's no longer there. So Dylan Edwards would be kind of the front runner for starting at running back. But with a healthy Alton McCaskill, I think it is Alton McCaskill's job to lose because he comes in as a player who dominated the last time we saw him. Now, granted, and this is why I've been talking about this position as a position of concern, the last time we saw him in a meaningful game and meaningful snaps was in 2021. He did play a couple of games this past year for Colorado. He played in the UCLA game, the Stanford game, the USC game, and the Oregon game. He had 14 total carries for 59 yards and 2 catches for 19 yards. And then he shut it down and was like, you know what? I'm not ready. I think with I won't say a whole season to get ready because obviously he kind of played a little bit, but he had a lot more time to rest. He has this whole offseason in spring to get back into it. He has this whole spring kind of session to earn that starting role. So if I'm Dylan Edwards or if I'm someone who's thinking that Dylan Edwards is going to start, I would say that Alton McCaskill is likely going to be starting, which means that Dylan Edwards will not be the starter. But that doesn't mean he won't be utilized. I think Dylan Edwards has that game-changing speed that can't keep him off the field. It's just one of those things where I think if they were to go to like an every down back, whereas like this guy's our bell cow, everyone else will rotate in, I think Alton McCaskill will be that guy. Then you look at wide receiver, and this is an interesting one because I had him starting when I did my depth chart projection, but then when I was talking to Scott and I'm just talking to other people around the program, there's a little bit of I'm gonna say a question mark, but there are some people that do think that Jimmy Horn Jr. may not be starting this next season for Colorado. Now, I don't know if I'm willing to be like, you know what, I think LeJounte West is going to take a spot, but I will say of all the spots that are up for grabs, in terms of it's not going to be Travis's spot that gets taken. The other spot I think will probably go to someone like the Vanderbilt transfer, Will Shepherd. And so that kind of leaves one spot. And there's Baby T.O., there's Terrell Timmons, there's LeJounte Wester. There's so many guys, Cameron McKell, Draylon Miller. There's so many guys that could kind of contend for a starting spot. And there's realistically only 3, maybe 4 starting spots or 3 spots. And then whoever's next as that 4th receiver. So does Jimmy Horn get a spot taken? I don't know if he'll get a spot taken, but it wouldn't shock me if a guy like LeJounte Wester comes in and has a much bigger role than people realize. LeJounte Wester was second in the country in catches this past season with over 100 and I think over 120. Let me confirm that because he was a do-it-all guy for the Florida Atlantic Owls, and that was with a subpar quarterback situation. They had Daniel Richardson and Casey Thompson, both of which were kind of meh. But yeah, he had 108. I think I said 120. 108 catches for 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns. So he's fast, he's speedy, and it comes down to who's dropping less passes. I think I would say that. Jimmy Horn had a case of the drops last year. I think he had 8 catches, which led the team. He made really good plays at times. He was elite speed. He's hard to bring down to open field, but there were times where you could tell he would kind of take himself out of the game, not like physically, but mentally, where he'd be like, oh, just dropped a pass. His body language kind of sulks. And Coach Prime even talked about it in the doc, whereas like Jimmy had to kind of be talked up a few times, like make your father proud. His dad is obviously, or was obviously, I don't know if he still is, but at the time when the documentary was being filmed, his dad was watching from while being incarcerated. So his Coach Prime just kept trying to tell him to like keep your head up, make your dad proud, like keep your head up. I'm not saying that he'll lose his spot altogether, but I do. It wouldn't shock me if that one of these new wide receivers comes in and snatches a spot. And I don't think it's gonna be Travis's spot unless they diminish his role in offense. And I don't think it's going to be a sort of a rotation thing. I think they want consistency. I think they will rotate guys in, but that doesn't mean that they're going to just have the same starters from last season altogether. And then I look at the defensive line. Obviously, it's going to be interesting to see how this defensive line lines up. I do think we have a lot of guys that are figuring out their positions, but I look at all the talent that they brought in, and Shane Cokes, another guy from last season who was like he was a leader for the team. Coach Prime loves him. He's obviously an Ivy League transfer, so he's a very smart young man. And I do think that with all the big bodies they got in, it wouldn't shock me. And when I'm saying losing their starting spot, it doesn't mean they're not going to start at all. These guys could start the first few games or first 6 games, and then all of a sudden someone takes their spot, or maybe something. Well, obviously, I hope nothing happens, but maybe someone comes in and is just proving themselves more than they are. Shane Coke stands out as someone who's fighting for his job because obviously you look at what they brought in. So what they brought in across the defensive line, Chidozie Nwanku, Torian Carter, and Quinn Barnes. All those guys are huge. Obviously, Shane Cooks was playing out of position. I get that. Not sure what his role is going to be this next season, but defense end, they brought in Samuel O. They brought in Quincy Wiggins. They also have J.J. Hawkins. They also have B.J. Green, who played linebacker, but he's listed as outside linebacker, but I'm sure they're going to try to get him rushing the quarterback as much as possible, so I'm sure he can line up wherever they darn well please. And so it's not to say that Shane Cooks isn't good enough to outduel these guys, but a lot of these guys are bigger, they're stronger, and do they kind of surpass him on the depth chart? I think Shane Cooks was going to have a role no matter what because of his leadership ability, but I do think that if there was someone on the defense line where it's like, okay, I could see someone else kind of emerging, like I don't know what position, like they're kind of in a positionless football, if you will, and I don't know who's going to step in and take that spot. But it wouldn't shock me if one of these big SEC or big transfers, like BJ Green had 5.5 sacks last season, and he had a ton of quarterback hurries. Like let me just read you the resume: 13.5 sacks over 36 games with Arizona State. That he's listed as a linebacker by some. Samuel O was starting to emerge as one of the better players for Pitt. He was a second-year freshman, tied for the team lead with 5 sacks and 12 quarterback pressures. He was obviously one of the most sought after guys this entire process. Quincy Wiggins, a guy from LSU who didn't play a lot in Baton Rouge, but was rated as one of the highest ranked transfers in the portal, 92 rating by 24/7 Sports. 6'5", 265 pounds. Obviously, he just didn't get a chance to get on the field there, but here he has a chance to kind of make a name for himself. And then there's a guy like Anquin Barnes or Torian Carter. Obviously, these guys are both playing inside. They're going to be battling with Chidozie Nwanku. But Anquin Barnes is 6'5", 315 pounds. That dude is a behemoth, and it wouldn't shock me if his size alone gets him on the field. And then obviously at Shane Cooks' position where he's projected to play, Amari McNeil was impressive last season. Dare I say, he performed better than what I thought he would, considering he didn't play a lot at Tennessee. I would say he's one of the few transfers from last season, not named Shador, Travis, Jimmy, or Xavier, or the punter, Mark Vassett, who outperformed their kind of expected rating. Like, I don't think a lot of people were expecting a lot from him, and he performed quite well. So those are the 3 positions that I think could be up for grabs. You comment below which position you think could be up for grabs. There's also Dustin Wade, wherever he kind of comes in into the mix, will be interesting as well, because obviously they brought in so much talent. It makes it a little bit harder to predict or foresee where these guys are going to end up. And I mean Keaton Wade, excuse me. So Keaton Wade, So you guys comment below which positions you think will be up for grabs. Obviously, they're all over the place. We don't really know what the defense looks like, but there are some positions that seem to be like they may be occupied by someone else. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The Nissan Rogue, 2024 Nissan Rogue, is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are all built in right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is a perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. You could also check out the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. Has room up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Again, that's NISSAN USA.com. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, so make sure to like, subscribe, follow, all that jazz. We're talking about the Big 12 disrespect. Obviously, as you guys know, I've been talking about it for quite some time now. The college football playoff has expanded, which gives Colorado a chance to kind of contend, because if they're contending for the playoff, or if you're contending for your conference title, you are contending for the playoff. The top conference champions all make it to the playoff next season. This will be the first year we're going away from that 4-team playoff where the committee picks the 4 best teams. Instead, there's going to be 4 conference champions. So it'll be the SEC, the Big 12, the ACC, and the Big 10. And then the best group of 5 team gets a spot. Remaining 7 spots go to the best teams that didn't win their conference title. So probably the teams that finished second in the conference title game, or a team like Notre Dame who's not in a conference. Okay. I won't say I'm the biggest fan of automatic bids, because I think we're going to hear a lot of complaints as soon as like an 8-5 or 9-3 team wins their conference, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, but they're not the best team. Well, I think it's hard to please everyone. I think the BCS system was not wrong. I feel like the BCS system was probably the way to go. Maybe we should have used the BCS system to decide the playoff order rather than a committee of people who are human and have flaws. But there was a new proposal suggested, as reported by Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, and the blatant disrespect to the Big 12 is absurd. So if you guys aren't familiar with the newest format, it's 12 teams, like I said, 5 basically conference champions, including the group of 5 won, and then 7 at-large teams. The new proposal proposed, that the playoff expands from 12 to 14 teams. So already moving on from 12 after what seems like a year. We haven't even got there yet. We're moving on from 12 to 14. And honestly, typically on a college football year, there aren't 14 teams to contend for a championship. Realistically, there aren't even 12. There are not 12 caliber championship teams across college football. But as we all know, it's a money grab and they want more teams to feel like they have chances, which I totally get. A team like Florida State this past season, who won their conference, went undefeated, but had injury issues, gets left out because obviously they just weren't viewed as one of the 4 best teams. So I can see either side. You could play devil's advocate with me, and I would probably be like, yeah, some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't. But this new proposal suggests that the SEC and the Big 10 should automatically get the top 2 seeds. They would get 2 buys if the playoff were to expand to 14 teams. So say this past year was Alabama, they would have got the top 2 seed. And then Michigan, they would have got the top 2 seed. And so they would have had first round buys just for winning their conference. Whereas the Big 12 and the ACC, because they would also get 2 other automatic bids. So in total, the SEC and Big 10 would get 3 bids each. And then the Big 12 and ACC would get 2 each. And I'm not all for participation trophies. I'm not all for I know life isn't fair, but that is the most absurd, proposal I've ever heard. Sonny Dykes put it best. Basically, that would be like saying the Dallas Cowboys get an automatic top seed or automatic bye week in the NFL playoffs because they have more fans than the Cincinnati Bengals. Yeah, it's not fair. It doesn't make sense. Realistically, if I were to fix the playoff, I think they're really obsessed with this conference championship thing, which I get because in years past we've seen teams like Penn State, TCU, Baylor, that was a while ago, not make it even though they won their conference championship. We've seen teams like Georgia who were probably the best team, but they didn't win their conference championship. So I feel like it puts value on the conference championship games, which I totally get. But this other, like, we need more playoff bids than you because we have more brands than you. No, no. Just because you wanted to kind of blow up college football and take the biggest brands and put them all together doesn't mean you guys deserve the most playoff spots. I genuinely think if you want to do the conference championship thing, do the same thing. The four Power Four champions, best group of five team, rank those teams however you want, or you could pick those teams as automatic teams, kind of take away like college basketball, and those five teams are all going to have a guaranteed spot in the playoff. But those seven other teams, or I guess if you're expanding it, uh, the however ever many teams, realistically, you kind of just look at it and you go, okay, well, what if this team is better? Like Notre Dame, for instance. What if Notre Dame is genuinely the best team in college football, but because they don't play in a conference, they don't get a bye? Like I get join a conference. That's obviously on Notre Dame. That is the quickest way to solve it. That is the easiest way to kind of be like, you know what though, we kind of have a solution for you. You join the ACC, but those nine other spots, just do at large bids, like best teams available. Because honestly, the top three teams in the SEC aren't always going to be the best teams in college football. I think we saw this past season Ole Miss would have been one of the top couple teams, or LSU. I think it would have been LSU because they were playing for the the SEC title game. So it would have been Georgia and Alabama would have both made it. Alabama would have made it by winning the conference. Georgia would have made it for being the next best SEC team. And then that third team would have been Missouri, who played against a depleted Ohio State team in their bowl game, and they only won by 11 points. Like, does that make sense? Or do we need to really see an Ole Miss team that basically narrowly escaped Tulane, who was playing their backup quarterback, or LSU, who was never really good against like superior SEC programs? They were just beating up on smaller programs. Like the one time they played a tough opponent, or the multiple times they played a tough opponent, they lost by double digits to LSU or to Florida State, excuse me, and then Ole Miss beat them and hung 55 on them. And then yeah, I don't know. Alabama beat them 42-28. It's just one of those things where it's like, do we need to see a guaranteed three SEC teams or three Big Ten teams just because they have the bigger brand? No, no, that's not how it works. I think that takes away from the allure of college football. That just makes it so much more corporate. I think if you don't think those five conference champions are the best teams, then rank them differently. Rank them accordingly via the playoff committee or the computer system, whatever it may be. I don't care. Just giving automatic bids to teams because they belong in a certain conference is ridiculous. I think it's disrespectful to the Big 12. I think it's disrespectful to the ACC. And it kind of tells those kids, hey, you guys are not as important. You guys are playing college football at a high level, but it does not matter because you're not in the SEC or the Big 12 or the SEC or the SEC or Big 10, excuse me. So it's just really one of those things. And I think realistically, if someone like Coach Prime came out and spoke out against it, he would probably get a lot of support because the way that they're kind of belittling the sport right now is ridiculous. And I'm not a fan of where this kind of playoff is headed. And obviously it's still a ways away. There was nothing approved. It was just the suggestion in and of itself was just pitiful to me. This episode of Locked on Bus is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. You can maybe take a shot on the Denver Nuggets, Nikola Jokic getting a triple-double, Michael Porter Jr., 5 over a certain amount of threes. You know he's a sharpshooter. You could look for any kind of prop and they will have it. Our friends over at FanDuel, they got everything. So, like I said, just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's LOCKEDON and shoot your shot. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, making me your first listen of the day. We kind of got to see the human element side of Coach Prime, and I do think that this year is going to be as serious as ever for him because it's a final ride for him and his kids. In a cool interview he did recently, he talked about how this year is special to him because it's the last time he will ever coach his kids, assuming he doesn't leave to the NFL, which he has denounced probably dozens of times by now. Maybe at least I would say he denies going to the NFL probably like once every 3 months at least. In season, it's probably twice every 3 months. But I just want to kind of focus on this season ahead of Colorado and just talk about how special it could be. As a program, Colorado has been down in the dumps for a hot minute. It's been a while since they were good, and even when they were good a few years ago, they did not sustain it. This Colorado team, this Colorado program, this Colorado fan base is dying for their program to return to success. They have a chance to contend for a conference title, therefore contend for a playoff. I think this Colorado team has a chance to be a lot better than most people are giving them credit for. Their win total is at 6.5. I would hit that over if I was a gambling man, which I'm not. That's not gambling advice. That's just what I would do. But it also will kind of be the last time that Coach Prime is coaching Shador, Shiloh, and Travis Hunter. Those three are all NFL bound, 99.9% chance. The only one that could return, well, I guess, actually, Shiloh said he could return, I believe, but they're all probably NFL bound. Travis Hunter, or Shador, both projected top 10 picks. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's going to be a special moment for people to witness, just kind of this camaraderie around the team, the family element to this team. And it's going to be a witness of we're all watching. It's like watching your own kids grow up in front of you. Coach Prime is watching his kids go from young men to grown adults to men. And it's going to be a true experience for him. He's obviously, it's going to be bittersweet, but I do think he wants to go out on top with his kids. I'm not saying he's leaving, but I do think he wants them to finish their college careers with a bang. They started off hot at Jackson State. Obviously, Shiloh had some time at South Carolina. And it's one of those things where it'll be a really special moment if Colorado has a good season because those three will really help take Colorado to the next level. They will help them in recruiting. It helps pave the way NIL wise, and it helps pique the interest in Colorado, which has already been piqued. But I do think it'll be a really awesome year for Colorado and Coach Prime. You guys won't want to kind of embrace the moment. I think he's going to embrace the moment, or at least he should, because it's going to be a really special opportunity. It's not often you get to coach your kids at the highest level of college football, and Coach Prime gets to do that, and hopefully it works out for them. Hopefully everyone stays healthy and they perform at the levels that they hope to. But either way, I will have you covered every step of the way here on Locked On Buffs. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, making me your first listen of the day. We are a few more subscribers away from 5,000 on YouTube. I appreciate you guys and all your support. Let's get there. I also appreciate all your guys' support on Spotify and Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow. Give me 5 stars. I appreciate it. And I hope to see you guys tomorrow.